managed to turn their biggest star's hometown celebration into a financial disaster. And what did Kathy Engelbert finally say about the officiating crisis during All-Star?
The story dominating headlines over the past few days has revolved around none other than Caitlin Clark, the undisputed superstar of the WNBA and face of the Indiana Fever, a player who has single-handedly transformed the economics, visibility, and cultural relevance of women's basketball, yet is now sidelined with injury at the very moment the league and her city had invested everything into her presence. And the fallout has been nothing short of catastrophic, not just for Indianapolis, but for the entire WNBA brand, because what was supposed to be Caitlin Clark's coronation during All-Star Week in her hometown has instead spiraled into a nightmare scenario exposing the league's incompetence, fragile dependence on one player, and blatant refusal to protect the very athlete driving its record growth. Fans had been promised a celebration unlike anything in league history, with Indianapolis plastering a jaw-dropping 34-story banner of Clark across the JW Marriott Hotel, the single largest banner ever on that building, larger even than the famous NCAA bracket banner from 2021, stretching 113.0 square feet with the bold words "From downtown in my town" radiating across the skyline, while the city constructed a replica All-Star court. At the airport, businesses hired extra staff and stocked inventory for the incoming crowds, hotels filled, and Gainbridge Fieldhouse sold out within hours of ticket release, as prices skyrocketed to record heights. $121 just to get in, an average resale of $260, and premium courtside seats hitting the thousands, a staggering figure for a league historically desperate to give tickets away. For weeks, anticipation built like a tidal wave, Clark's presence driving the highest secondary market demand in All-Star Game history, the kind of surge reserved only for transcendent stars like LeBron James or Michael Jordan in the NBA. And for the first time, the WNBA wasn't presenting an exhibition of anonymous players, but a genuine spectacle built around a generational figure. Yet on July 17th, everything collapsed with brutal swiftness. The moment Clark's groin injury was announced, a reality fans had feared but the league had recklessly ignored, by allowing months of unchecked physical abuse against her to escalate to the point of inevitability. And within hours, the ticket market disintegrated in real time, a crash that could be tracked refresh by refresh on social media, as average prices plummeted from $260 to $60, a 75% nosedive unprecedented in WNBA history, while the get-in price plunged from $121 to around $65, and even then, buyers weren't biting because demand wasn't just dipping, it had vanished completely, leaving sellers panicking as investments evaporated and desperate fans undercut one another. $121 became $100, no takers, then $80, still no buyers, down to $70, nothing, until eventually tickets were dumped at $60 in a fire sale that symbolized the harsh reality that without Caitlin Clark, the product itself wasn't worth attending. And this wasn't a slow decline stretched across days. It was a free-fall financial catastrophe unfolding minute by minute, a devastating message from the marketplace about who actually matters in this league, and the truth could not be clearer. Caitlin Clark is not just a star, she is the WNBA's only proven economic engine. We've seen hints of this pattern before, but never at this apocalyptic scale. When Clark missed regular season games earlier in May with a quad strain, ticket markets in Washington and Chicago collapsed too, dropping 47% and 71%, respectively. But those were just random road games. This was the All-Star Game in her hometown, marketed as her national coronation, the biggest weekend Indianapolis had hosted since the NBA's All-Star event years prior. And without her, the demand fell off a cliff, exposing how fragile the league's success truly is. And the collapse wasn't limited to tickets. The ripple effects torched the entire city's economic ecosystem. Gainbridge Fieldhouse, packed to the rafters for nearly 2 straight years of Fever games, was suddenly facing its first non-sellout. while vendors who had poured thousands into all-star merchandise braced for crushing losses. Restaurants and bars downtown saw cancellations pile up. Hotels once overbooked scrambled to deal with empty rooms, and local businesses that had hired temporary staff found themselves overstaffed and underpatronized, all because the one athlete who drives eyeballs and wallets was out. This wasn't merely one player missing one exhibition game, this was a brutal reminder that without Clark the entire WNBA juggernaut sputters. A reality the league desperately wants to downplay but can no longer deny. Other stars, when injured, do not cause secondary market prices to crater. No other absence rewrites the entire financial landscape of a marquee weekend. Only Caitlin Clark has that level of pull, and that dependency is both the WNBA's greatest asset and its glaring weakness. And what makes this collapse even more enraging is the reason behind it. Clark's injury was not some random twist of fate, but the predictable consequence of months of reckless officiating malpractice and a leadership unwilling to protect its centerpiece from escalating abuse. Since entering the league, Clark has endured an avalanche of physical targeting that borders on assault, as defenders figured out early that referees were swallowing whistles whenever she was grabbed, shoved, elbowed, or hammered, leading to her absorbing more flagrant fouls than any other rookie in history, including a staggering 20% of all flagrants league-wide. Most at the hands of rivals like Angel Reese, who openly laughed after leveling her, mocking injuries that would in any other workplace lead to lawsuits or criminal charges. Clark's rookie season was essentially a crash course in surviving sanctioned violence, and even her own coach Stephanie White has repeatedly called out the double standard, noting that opponents are allowed to play a brand of physicality against Clark that no one else faces, with refs essentially daring teams to keep battering her. White warned from the start that the abuse was unsustainable, that Clark's body could only take so much, yet nothing changed. And instead of celebrating their generational ticket seller, the WNBA effectively greenlit her being hunted nightly, while national media from the Washington Post to independent analysts ripped the officiating as second-rate, chronic, inconsistent, and dangerous, even joking that the league's logo should be a bruise and its motto no call, because that's how glaring the negligence had become. Watch the film and the evidence is damning. Defenders hooking Clark's arms on drives, hammering her off screens, shoving her to the floor without whistles, with referees staring directly at the contact and letting play continue, creating an environment where targeting Clark wasn't just allowed but actively rewarded as a defensive strategy. And this year it hasn't only been her. Sophie Cunningham, Olia Boston, and others on the Fever have started absorbing similar cheap shots, as if punishing Clark's team became league-wide sport, yet still officiating remained toothless, a pattern that culminated in Clark's groin injury and robbed Indianapolis of its historic weekend. So now the city that draped her 30 for stories high, that marketed her face as the symbol of women's sports renaissance, is left staring at empty seats, plummeting ticket values, furious fans demanding refunds, vendors counting losses, and a WNBA commissioner in Kathy Engelbert finally forced to address what everyone has been screaming all season, that the league is failing its own superstar, and in doing so, failing itself. The All-Star Game was supposed to be proof of growth, a festival to silence critics. Instead, it turned into Exhibit A of everything broken, a business model propped entirely on one player, a fan base ready to revolt when she's absent, and officiating culture more interested in appeasing jealous veterans than protecting marketable talent, and leadership so reactive that they only acknowledge crises after the damage is irreversible. Fans have made their position clear. They're not buying tickets to see the league. They are buying to see Caitlin Clark, and when she is missing or mistreated, the product collapses, because for all the league's talk of parity and collective stars, the numbers reveal the opposite. Their records, revenues, attendance booms. Television ratings and merchandise sales all rise and fall with number 22. And yet, instead of safeguarding her, the league has left Clark exposed, battered, and now sidelined, while pretending this was just bad luck rather than their own systemic failure. And the result is what we saw in Indianapolis, the biggest financial disaster in WNBA All-Star history. A coronation transformed into humiliation, a celebration turned into boycott, and a city's dream weekend wrecked by short-sighted leadership unwilling to face reality. Until the WNBA learns its lesson, until it admits that Caitlin Clark is not just another player but the very foundation of its success, this pattern will repeat. And the question fans are now asking with increasing anger is simple. Will the league wake up before they run their golden goose into the ground?
Baseline, and Griner, who's still a little hobbled, I think going to be a terrific.
The truth about Caitlin Clark's injury and the officiating crisis in the WNBA is ugly, undeniable, and now impossible to cover up. For months, fans have watched officials ignore the most obvious fouls in basketball whenever Clark is on the floor. She can be grabbed, shoved, elbowed, and held for entire possessions without a whistle. But when it's the Indiana Fever on defense, suddenly every tiny touch becomes a foul. It's a rigged double standard and everyone sees it. The officials are not enforcing the rule book. They're actively putting Clark and her teammates at a disadvantage. What makes this worse is how unprecedented it is. Across sports history, leagues have always given their biggest draws some level of protection. Michael Jordan had it, Kobe Bryant had it, LeBron James has it, Tom Brady had it in the NFL. Stars get calls because leagues know protecting their superstars is protecting the business. But Caitlin Clark, the WNBA's most important player since its founding, she's been treated like a practice dummy, shoved to the ground nightly while refs look the other way. The numbers prove this isn't exaggeration, it's systemic failure. According to the Washington Post, in just the past 2.5 seasons, there have been 57 head and neck injuries across the league, most of them targeting guards and wings, the very positions Clark plays. That's not normal wear and tear. That's a dangerous pattern the league refuses to address. Clark's groin injury isn't bad luck, it's the direct consequence of months of unchecked targeting. Every ignored grab and every uncalled shove building up to this inevitable moment. WNBA legend Lisa Leslie knows exactly what Clark is facing. She dealt with the same injury in 2006 and admitted it never really goes away, it lingers, it nags. It changes how you move and how you play. Leslie herself still feels it years later, and now Clark is stuck battling that same brutal reality mid-season when rest isn't